Quilt Monkey is brought to you by Aurifil Italian thread, perfectly suited for all your quilting projects.
Hi and welcome to Quilt Monkey. Since I saw you last, I've now put the first plain border on our centre medallion for our medallion quilt, and on this show we are going to start with the first pieced border. So we are back to using the bark cloth again, but we also have this cheeky little fabric substrate. This is a new one, so we're going to add that in just for a little bit of an adventure. I'm going to go and make myself a cup of tea because I've run out. You can go and put your kettle on and let's get started. With our first pieced border, we need to consider the fabrics first. So we don't want everything to be too scrappy too early on. The problem that we've got with using fabrics like these that are very, very big and kind of in your face is that if we add too much scrappiness at this stage, by the time we finish, it's going to look like an explosion of crazy. So you need to make sure that you kind of tone down and just introduce a little bit of extra gradually, because the finished effect is going to be great if you just keep that in mind and just kind of tone it down, which is not something that I do particularly well. I like to chuck all of the colours in at once and kind of hope for the best. So I am kind of thinking a little bit outside my comfort zone with this. So what I've done is I've picked a first fabric that kind of has the colour story that I want to run through this whole border. So that first fabric is this one here. So I've picked that because it goes really nicely with the first set of fabrics. It's got all of the right, colours in to complement, but it doesn't clash with anything, which is really important. So the second fabric that I've brought in is this one. It's got the same base colour, it's got the same background, they're both black. We've got some of the purpley pink from the first colour story, and then we've added in a bit of green, but it's kind of a blue green, so it complements the blue in the first fabric. And also it's got a bit of glitter, so that's always great. And then I've added in a third fabric, which is a new substrate. And this is one of Anna Maria Horner's luminous fabrics. So they're like an Indian cotton. They're a woven cotton and they're kind of lightweight. They remind me a little bit of either a really lightweight summer dress or a cover-up that you'd wear, on the beach. They're really, really light. I don't think they have a right or wrong side. They're a woven, so it's not a dyed fabric. The colour is woven all the way through. It's just a really lovely soft cotton, really, really nice. But they are a cotton, 100% cotton, just like the rest of the fabrics. But because they are very lightweight, it's not really a loose weave, but it's a softer weave than a regular quilting cotton. You have to bear that in mind when you're using it. So you might need to use a little bit of spray starch. Just be careful with the iron. Don't, go crazy, just press, don't iron. And also we don't want to piece anything that's too small. So when you start with your borders, don't go too tiny, because these fabrics don't like to be pieced super, super tiny. They don't like anything that's too much of a sharp point or too much of a curve. You have to bear that in mind when you're planning and when you're piecing, that everything is kind of a safe size and a nice simple block. And obviously what we're doing with this one is, rather than planning out each row before we piece, we're doing a kind of improv, but it's more of a precision improv. So we are laying out our fabrics, measuring our borders, thinking what would go nicely, having a little bit of that improv nature, but using traditionally pieced, normal, regular quilt blocks. If you've seen Nick, my other quilt monkey, when he presents his shows, he's more of a super improv guy. His quilt is just hanging behind me, and he loves things that are really, really improv. So he'll take a piece of fabric and just cut it however, there's no rulers or no scissors, and everything is that super improv. So he has an idea of how he wants things to look, but he goes about it in less of a precision pieced way. I like the safety of traditional blocks. So I'm trying to be a little bit out of my comfort zone with this quilt, but still holding my own hand. So I've got my 3 fabrics. I know that I don't want to piece anything that's too small, and a good way to start with planning is taking some of your background fabric. So I'm using the same background fabric as I have previously. It's the Linen Texture by Macawa. And I've cut myself some borders, and I want them to be wider than the first border, but not so wide that it looks kind of clunky. So I've cut at 4.5 inches. 4.5 inches is a good size to get a smaller piece from these fabrics, but not so tiny that it's going to cause us problems. So I've kind of thought about that and cut my borders, and I'm just going to lay them out like so, just around 2 edges of the quilt. And then I've pieced some kind of fake flying geese, so just half square triangle blocks. So I've got a kind of scrappy look with the 2 different fabrics going on there, but it's not so scrappy because the backgrounds are the same and there's a continuity with it. So it's scrappy, but a very controlled scrappy look. And they are 2.5 inch, so 2-inch finished half square triangle blocks. So I cut my background squares and my print squares at 3.5 inches, cut them in half, sewed them together, made half square triangle units and trimmed in each one down to 2.5 inches. And I've just made a few of those, and I'm going to lay them out around my block here, so I can just get an idea of how my border might look. So I know that I want to add in some background, so I've got a little bit of a space within the quilt for my eyes to rest, and that it's not too scrappy, but also because it makes your maths really easy. So when you're working out how many blocks you need to make for your borders, if you measure it and then measure the size of the edge and then divide that by however many blocks you want to make, or however the size of the blocks finish at, then your maths is it can be a little bit more tricky. Whereas this way, you can make so many blocks and then add a piece of background just to make it a little bit easier. But it also looks really cool, because what you're going to end up with is a look that's a bit like this. So you're going to have some little geese coming down one side, and then some coming around, and then a space, and then you can have some geese, and then a space, and then some geese, and then a space, and and so on. So it flows around, and everything looks really cool, but you've got a little bit of space for your eyes to rest, and also so your maths is a little bit easier. Because I am not that great at maths, and I like to make my life a little bit easier. So I'm going to have a play around with this now and see how I want my little fake geese to sit. And you could have it so that you've got them at either end and then a bit of space in the middle, or have them all coming in with kind of a cornerstone effect. So you've just got geese coming up and down, and then a space there and a space at the side here. You can do it however you like. You can add in more, you can have fewer. You can have a completely different background colour if you want, or use one of your prints and then have these as kind of more solid, more of a place for your eye to rest. It's completely up to you. I'm going to go and sew my little geese together now and add my background and sew my first border on, and I'll come back and show you. And there we have it. That's the first pieced border on the medallion. If you want it to have less background space, then just make more half square triangle geese to go around and fill up that space a little bit more. But for the next border, it's going to be a much more heavily pieced border. So it's going to start getting a little bit more hectic as we're going on from here. So this border itself, it's still got plenty of space for our eyes to rest. We've just got a suggestion of piecing, which I think works really nicely. But like I say, next time we're going to go heavy on the piecing, and we're going to really start to make this look like the scrappy medallion quilt that it is. So I hope you have fun and you start making your medallion quilt, and I'll see you next time on Quilt Monkey.